Welcome back to the second episode of the Clubhouse Briefing Podcast. I am your host, Colton Kelly, and it is a very, very beautiful evening. I'm recording this out of my normal time. I usually do it on the weekend during the mid-afternoon, maybe early evening, but it's after work. And I was like, you know what? I need to do some stuff anyway with my computer, so I might as well, and I may go ahead and record this. So this is not orange juice. It is doctor's order per my wife to help with any sort of cold or summer flu that's going around, because I'm recording this. I guess in Texas, it's still summer. It's September's. Not quite fall time for us yet. It's still 95 degrees during the day. But yes, I'm filming this at my house as normal, but it is nighttime. So bit different for me. But I have to say, thank you for tuning in. This is our third full episode at this point. We've done an episode about me, our introduction series. The first episode about the highest paid golfers of 2025. And then this is now our third episode. I'm going to call it episode 2. So welcome to the second official episode of the podcast. And I have to say, thank you for tuning in. I enjoy making these, and going through and being able to research these topics and everything has been a lot of fun for me. It's broadened my knowledge of the golf industry. And so, thank you once again. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day, whether you're listening to this in the morning or listening to this at night. Just want to say thank you. Hope you're having a good day, and hope you learned some cool stuff, because today we're going to be talking about the Masters. And specifically, we're going to cover 3 things. The first one is how the Masters has added additional qualifying spots for the winners of national opens, and they've made a sneaky change to the FedEx Cup and how those points are going to be used for qualifying for the tournament. Second thing I want to talk about is we'll cover the current qualifications for someone getting into the Masters tournament. And then finally, third, I want to talk about what the new changes mean for the game of golf and whether or not I think they're warranted and if I think they're good or not. So I'll open with this. Last year, when Rory McIlroy won, fantastic tournament. He won the Masters in dramatic fashion. He became the 6th player in history to win the modern Grand Slam in golf. So that includes the Masters, the Open, the PGA, and then the U.S. Open Championship. There is a different Grand Slam depending on the time decade. I think around the 1930s to 40s, there was a different Grand Slam that you could win with some amateur tournaments, but we're not talking about that. The modern Grand Slam in golf, those 4 tournaments I just mentioned, Roy's won that. So he did it after waiting, I want to say it was 13 or 14 years from early 2010s when he had a shot to win. But the viewership numbers for that tournament on Sunday's final round, they peaked at 19.5 million people watching. And that was right around 7:15 Eastern Coast time. And then the average viewing audience was about 12.7 million people. He won $4.2 million for that accomplishment and etched his name into the history of golf. And so very, very good tournament. Plus, on top of all that, the Masters represents for a lot of folks their favorite time of the year. It's the beginning of the golf season for a lot of people. For Texas, we've already been in for about a month or so up to that point. And so it's the beginning of the golf season for a lot of folks. And I would describe it as the happiest week of the year. Great tournament, a lot of anticipation leading up to this year's tournament, or I guess next year's 2026 Masters tournament. And the preparations are already underway. And I can imagine that due to me seeing this headline from Golf Digest. They published an article on August 26th of this year saying the Masters and the Open Championship just changed their qualifying criteria. Some will like it, others won't. When I look at this, when I read it, my first thought that popped into my head was, how do you play in the Masters? Like, is it complicated, or are there 10 simple ways or things that I would need to do to get in? And now I'll circle back to that Golf Digest article in just a second. I just touched on it. I'll circle back in just a second. But I feel like the topic of qualifying for the Masters is important for a couple reasons. First, the Masters has stated that it's a global event, and it prides itself on having the best competition from around the world. And so I know me growing up and other players from around the world, they have that dream. They have that dream of getting the chance to win the Masters tournament. And I think enabling talented players from everywhere to qualify for it aligns with the tournament's mission of being a global event. The second reason why I think it's important to talk about the qualifying impacts of the Masters is it brings a whole host of opportunities for a player. You can get sponsorship exposure through example comes to mind of Cameron Smith signing with Original Penguin, for example. Plus, players gain sponsorship exemptions into large tournaments on the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour. And the financial aspects of making the cut at the Masters as a pro is very, very important to touch on. Now, I do need to note, when I mentioned that Cameron Smith signing with Original Penguin, I do need to mention that Cameron was re-signing with the company. He was already sponsored by them, and so that transaction was just a re-signing. However, Cameron did post a second place Masters at the 2020 Masters tournament, which I would heavily argue did factor in probably the Original Penguin's decision on whether or not we can re-sign him, what is his contention in the future majors going to look like, and then how is he as a player in terms of marketability. And so he was getting re-signed, but I also think him placing second at the Masters that year did have some impact on that. And so moving back to my previous point about the financial impacts of qualifying for the Masters, take for example the ISPS Handa Australian Open. This is one of the tournaments that we're going to discuss later on the podcast, and the current tournament winner is Riggs Johnson. Now, DP World Tour. If you need someone to cover the financial aspects of Australian golf, please hit me up on my socials. I've always wanted to go to Australia, so reach out if you're interested. But Riggs is a DP World Tour member who's played on the DP World Tour for about 9 months up to this point. And after winning that tournament, he was rewarded $224,000. The last place player who made the cut, the person last but made the cut, so he qualified, but he got paid, was named Lachlan Barker. He earned $3,300. Now, if Riggs Johnson or Lachlan Barker made the cut but finished last place at this year's Masters tournament, they would have earned $52,670 in prize money. That is about 23% of what Riggs got for winning the tournament, and it's about 16 times what Lachlan made just by making the cut at this tournament. Now, obviously, what both of these players have accomplished by winning the Australian Open and making the cut, that is far beyond what I could do as a player, and it deserves credit and respect. But if you're looking at this objectively, you're not going to win every week, and making cuts is not always guaranteed. And so qualifying for the Masters and receiving access to a larger purse amount can help up-and-coming tour professionals, along with pros who do play on these tours week in, week out. They have more money at their disposal because the purses are larger, their winning payouts are going to be larger, and it can help them financially a lot. And so, circling back to the Golf Digest article, this is what they report. When this information has been confirmed by Augusta National. They report that the Masters tournament is rewarding automatic invitations to the winners of 6 national opens. They are the Scottish Open, which Chris Gotterup is the current winner of that tournament, the Spanish Open, the Japan Open, the Hong Kong Open, the Australian Open, and the South African Open. Furthermore, Augusta National has also updated how they are going to reward qualifying points to PGA Tour events. So, quoting from this article from Golf Digest, the invitations to PGA Tour winners applies only to individual winners of PGA Tour events that reward a full point allocation, which is a minimum of 500 points, by the way. And that is applied to the season-ending Tour Championship, which, putting it plainly, and I say this with some sadness on my heart, is that the PGA Tour winners of fall schedule events will not get automatic invitations into the Masters tournament. Now, before I share my thoughts on this, I want to discuss the current ways that you can qualify for the Masters. I touched on this at the very beginning of the video. And prepare for quite the list. It's very, very thorough. And so prepare to have a lot of me reading off this sheet that I have in front of me. Per the Masters website, and I'll link everything like I always do in the show notes, the following ways that you can earn an invitation into the Masters tournament include: you are a Masters tournament champion at any point in time, and you get a lifetime exemption into the tournament. And so you've seen Ben Crenshaw, Jack Nicklaus, a lot of the older players that are still playing, they get lifetime exemptions. Second is U.S. Open champions for the last 5 years. Now, they're stated as being honorary after 5 years, and so I'm guessing they're allowed to come and watch, but they're not allowed to play. Third is the Open champions within the last 5 years. They're honorary after 5 years after that. Fourth, PGA Championship winners within the last 5 years. They're honorary after 5 years. They can come watch. They can't play. And then the winners of the Players' Championship within the last 3 years. That was number 5. Number 6, you are the current Olympic gold medalist, and you can compete the year after winning gold. So Scotty won the Olympics in 2024. That's the last time they were played, I believe. And so he wins it in 2024, 2025 Masters. He gets a sponsor's invitation. Number 7 is the current U.S. amateur champion. Sorry, if you hear a dog, that is my neighbor's dog, who always at 8:30 to 9 o'clock, he is going to bark. And so Number 7, the current U.S. Amateur champion. So for this year, it's Mason Howell, and you also get the runner-up, Jackson Harrington. They're allowed to play in the tournament. Number 8 is the current winner of the Amateur Championship hosted by the RNA. So it's like the U.S. Amateur, but overseas in Europe. I think it's primarily over in Great Britain, Ireland, Scotland area. 9, the current winner of the Asia Pacific Amateur Championship. 10, Latin America Amateur Championship. And then you have the current winner of the U.S. Mid-Am. And so it's been Stuart Hagstead for a long time, but that's just for players that are 25 and over. It's their version of the U.S. Amateur. You have the current NCAA Division I champion. It's Michael Lasso. Got a killer golf swing, by the way. Number 13 is the first 12 players, including ties, in the previous Masters tournament, which you'll notice that I have to touch on this. It is a recurring theme, so I want to touch on it. I'm assuming that if a player finishes top 12, top 4, top 8, whatever it is, if they finish top 12 at the Masters, but they win the U.S. Open Championship, let's say they win the U.S. Open, but they also finish top 12, they're going to qualify for the Masters by winning the Open or the U.S. Open. And so that spot that would be reserved for them is going to move to the next player. So in this case, if Scotty wins the Open, he gets qualified in, he finishes top 12 at the Masters for that year, it's going to move to the next guy. That's how I'm assuming it would work. But I don't have access to the actual sheets that they do all this with. So that's my initial calculations on who would be able to qualify, but it could be different now. Number 14 is the first 4 players, including ties, for the previous year's U.S. Open, the first 4 players, including any ties at the previous year's Open Championship, the first 4 players, including any ties for that year's PGA Championship. And number 17 is the new one. Number 17 states it's the individual winners. I touched on this earlier. Individual winners of PGA Tour events that award full point allocation that's applied to the season-ending tour championship. Like I mentioned earlier, I've touched on this, and my thoughts will come because this is honestly just whack to me. 18 is those qualifying and eligible for the previous year's season-ending tour championship. And then you have the current winner of the Scottish Open, the Spanish Open, Japan Open, Hong Kong Open, Australian Open, the South African Open. Number 25 and 26 are tied to official world golf ranking points. They are the 50 players on the final official world golf ranking for the previous calendar year. So you're in the top 50 for the OWGR for the previous calendar year. And so if it's for the top 50 for the 2026 Masters, they're going to look at the 2025 top 50 players in the world. And then corresponding to that, the last one, 26, is the 50 players on the official world golf ranking leaderboard points. So top 50 players on that OWGR leaderboard for the week leading into the Masters tournament. And so that is currently all the ways that someone can qualify for the Masters tournament. At this point in time, it may change. I don't think it's going to change because that is a lot of ways to get in. And that list includes both of the changes that I mentioned before. So here's my thoughts on those changes. Number 1, getting more national representation from around the world into the Masters is a great thing. I applaud it. It is wonderful. And as I mentioned earlier in the pod, winning a national open for a DP World Tour player or an elite amateur that is trying to get to a big time status, it's a big achievement in and of itself for them. And giving those players, the players that maybe win less prestigious events than a PGA Tour event, maybe similar caliber fields, but just not as big of a name as a PGA Tour event, giving them the opportunity to showcase their skills and to truly test themselves against the world's best golfers, I think that's amazing. It is wonderful. And personally, I think if I had to give a sense of priority to the 26 things I went over, I would give these players invitations, the ones that win national opens and lesser known tour events, before the top 50 players in the official world golf rankings, especially if it's the players who qualified for the Masters by reaching the top 50 in the world the week before the Masters. I just think that that's not fair for someone that won a lesser caliber tournament. I mean, you could argue that the top 50 in the world are getting there for consistent play, but they're also going to have more chances, I would argue, to get into that tournament. So giving it to someone else who won a hard tournament one time, giving them that chance to get in there, I value to be more of a priority, and I feel like it'd help grow the game. And I'll say 2 things about that. I think it'll cause it would cause PGA Tour and Corn Ferry Tour professionals to travel around the world more. They would go to places like Australia, Japan, Scotland, in hopes that winning these countries' national opens would grant them access into the Masters. And with that, it's going to elevate those tournaments to more sponsorships, to more foot traffic, to fans that want to go there, more media coverage, and which, as you can imagine, that's going to lead to more people in those local economies, and it's going to help businesses in those areas. And it's also going to bring more people to the areas and get more exposure for the towns and the golf courses. And I think it's all in all just a good thing for the local golf courses and cities that are hosting those. And then second, I think that more collegiate athletes who graduate and they still aspire to play professionally, they're going to want to go on the DP World Tour and they're going to want to play. The same thing for elite amateurs who want to play professionally, say someone that skipped college but is still a very, very good professional or a very, very good amateur golfer and wants to turn professional. I just think that would be really good for them because I know a lot of U.S. athletes that will go and they'll go play on the Corn Ferry Tour due to a number of reasons. You're close to home, maybe the pay is a little bit better than the DP World Tour. But I think giving these National Opens qualifying rights to the Masters will cause more college athletes to want to go play on the DP World Tour. And frankly, I love the DP World. I like watching it. The announcers are great. The competition's good. The venues, I feel like, are a different breed than what we get over here in the States. I've been to a few states and been able to play golf courses on the East and the West Coast. And so I feel like that style of golf and what players would get going to travel the world on the DP World Tour, that's something that they're not going to get here if they stay in the States on the Corn Ferry. So I think it's a good thing. I think getting players on the DP World is a great thing. And I think that Augusta giving those National Opens qualifying spots can only be a good thing. Now, my second point is that not awarding the PGA Tour Fall schedule events the same status as the spring through the summer events is crazy to me. Absolutely bonkers. And I love the PGA Tour. I like the DP World Tour. I like the PGA Tour. I like all golf. All of it's great. I love it. But I just think that is crazy because the Pro Tour Championship, which they just happened recently, it was the first fall schedule event on the PGA Tour, and it awarded 500 FedEx Cup Fall points to Scottie Scheffler. And I'll show on the screen of the recording going through the schedule so you can see this. But I just think, first off, Scottie won this event, and it was a packed field. I believe 10 out of the 12 U.S. Ryder Cup players were in that field, and the competition was legit. Are we going to assume that Scottie Scheffler would not receive a Masters invitation next year for 2026 because he won the event? Let's say he hadn't won anything all year, hasn't won a single tournament all year, and this was his first victory this season. Why would he not have a chance to play in the Masters? You would rightfully think, okay, he's a legit competitor on tour. He just beat 10 out of 12 Ryder Cup players. The competition is star-studded and packed. Why would he not get the same tournament points and tournament standing as Cam Young got for winning the Wyndham Championship? They both get 500 points. But in Scottie's case, or anyone else's case, let's say Glanto Griffin, if he would have won it, they don't get the full treatment and full privilege of being able to qualify for the Masters that Cam Young wins for winning 4 weeks earlier. And those points, the FedEx Cup Fall points, just happen to be counting towards the fall, so they don't mean anything. And I get what your intentions are, PGA Tour, but just come on. Because here's my final hot take on this. In Augusta's national statement, they said individual winners of PGA Tour events that award full point allocation to the season-ending tour championship. So I'm confused. I thought the fall schedule of the PGA Tour was supposed to count towards the next year's FedEx Cup because it's a wraparound season. I've always heard that the PGA Tour is a wraparound season, so why don't the PGA Tour Fall events count towards next year's FedEx Cup? Because it's either the fall schedule is the beginning of the season, like you have the Tour Championship, you have the off week. This week the Ryder Cup's going on, so this is kind of our off time. You have the Pro Tour, Ryder Cup week, and then you have the rest of the fall season. And so either the fall schedule is the beginning of the season because those tournaments happen after the season-ending Tour Championship, and those FedEx Cup points automatically roll over to the next year. So Pro Tour of 2025 rolls over to 2026 FedEx Cup, or the fall schedule is solely just there to help players keep the tour cards, and they don't have any implications for the FedEx Cup payouts, which, if that's what the tour wants to do, great. have at it. I don't really care because it doesn't affect me. I just get to make a fun podcast about it. But it's hard for me to understand where the tour is coming from, because you're essentially telling your own members that, yeah, you won a tour event, but it wasn't the same as any other tour event that somebody else won. So we're not going to give you the same benefits that they got. The person that won the Waste Management Phoenix Open, he gets more points than you, and he gets to go to the Masters, even though you may have won an event with a better field than the Waste Management. And so it's just a hard spot for the tour to be in. So if I'm being honest, I really hope they figure it out soon, because it's just confusing. Like, researching this took probably 15 to 30 minutes of watching videos, another 15 to 30 minutes of going through the website, and it's just really confusing. And especially with the FedEx Cup season, how they're doing points and how they're doing the season-long winner. And like on my other video I just released, Scotty won 5 times, and he wasn't the end of the season winner. Tommy Fleetwood was. And so I think there's just some things they have to work out. There's just some kinks that have to be worked out with this system, because it's confusing. And so here are my main 3 takeaways after reading the Golf Digest article about what the Masters qualifying changes are. Number 1 is, I believe the Masters is doing a good thing by awarding those additional National Open winners qualifying spots. For all the reasons that I just mentioned, I think that this is a great and well-respected move by Augusta National, and there are going to be a lot of talented players at the 2026 Masters Tournament. Augusta National, I put in my application for tickets, and I told my wife, I said, look, if I get Masters tickets, we're going. I didn't win this year, though. So 2027, hit me up, Augusta National. Second, main takeaway is just not treating PGA Tour Fall events as the same as the spring events is confusing. And even when they award, again, I'll put it up on screen if I haven't already, even when they award the same number of points, 500 for the spring, 500 for the fall, doesn't count. That's just confusing. And I think it sends a bad message to your players. And this ties in with my third point of the PGA Tour needs to figure out what's going on with their FedEx Cup and the fall schedule. The Masters is going to base its qualifying criteria off what the PGA Tour is doing. And so it's hard not to imagine that other majors, let's say the PGA or the US Open, which different governing bodies, I understand, but it's hard for me not to imagine that the other majors aren't paying attention to this, and they're not going to lock down their schedules and how they reward points based on what the Open and the RNA and the Masters is going to do. And so I think they really just need to lock in on, this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to put the best players in the best competition in this event and pay them what they're worth. So those are my main 3 takeaways. And since you've made it to the end of the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you told someone about us, about what I'm doing here, and if you shared it with a family member, a coworker, a friend of yours that you think would really enjoy it. That'd be great, because I find these interesting. I think hopefully you would by this point. You're watching the second one. So I put a fair amount of time and effort into these. And so I make sure I put in my stuff. I link my resources. I make sure I'm prepared to get on camera. I have noticed I talk a little fast, so I'm going to work on slowing these down and dictating more of the words that I say. But I put a fair amount of time into recording and researching all this stuff. And so if you would just, like I said, share this with somebody else that you know, and be on the lookout for our next episode. We're going to be discussing Titleist and its parent company, Acushnet, and their latest financial report and how they're performing as a company. And so we'll go over the company's balance sheet for their second quarter report they just published. We'll go over the company's balance sheet, their earnings for 2025, and then we'll also recap how the company's performed across different products and different brands that they own. And so I'm super excited, currently researching that as I speak right now. And so, like I said, while you're here, share it with somebody. Go over to our other podcast episodes on YouTube, or you can also find it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever you're on. We are on those 3. And so I think we've got a wide array of channels that we can reach you for. And like I said earlier, hope you have a great day. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.